Hello again, and welcome back to Tanya in Real Life. It's very exciting. We're starting now chapter 18. But before we start chapter 18, there's something important. When I was preparing, I realized I left something important out of the previous chapter, chapter 17. I just want to go back to it very quickly. In chapter 17, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, wrapped up an explanation of the pasuk, the verse in the Torah that says, Ki karev elecha hadavar ma'od, b'ficha u'belvavecha la'aseh. That it's very close to you, very possible, very accessible to fulfill the entire Torah, to be completely, utterly aligned with Hashem. In other words, to be a Beinani, it's very possible. B'ficha u'belvavecha la'aseh. In your mouth, with the words you say, in your heart, with the emotions that you feel, la'aseh, and your actions to do it. And the question is that we've been asking all along, how is it very accessible, especially to change our emotions? Either I love Hashem or I don't. And the same question applies to all of the other emotions, the mitzvahs of the heart. How are we supposed to love each other? This person gets on my nerves. I find them so annoying. I'm put off by them. I find the other person to be so triggering. I don't like being around them. I get upset when I'm around them, because their behavior is so obnoxious and so inconsiderate, right? How am I supposed to love them? How am I supposed to love Hashem? How am I supposed to love every Jewish soul, every neshama? My heart doesn't come with control switches to turn on and off automatically. I don't have buttons to press now what I want to feel. I don't have choices about it. So how could the Torah give us instructions about how to feel? How could we be utterly aligned with Hashem, even in our hearts? And of course, this has been the underlying theme of everything that we've been learning so far. And in chapter 17, the Baal Tanya wraps it up with and says that it's true. We do not have choices about our emotions. There are no buttons to press in our heart. We can't decide, oh, I want to feel this way, and boom, we suddenly feel this way. But we do have choices about our minds. We could choose what to think. We could think about anything we want. And whatever we think about has an impact, a direct impact, a transformative impact on our emotions. So by thinking about Hashem, by thinking about Hashem's greatness, we could develop a love for Hashem, at least an intellectually, an appreciation of who Hashem is. And with that, we can get our hearts on board with Hashem's reality. Now, there's a detail that we left out in that I wanted to add, and here's the detail. When the Baal Tanya is wrapping up this teaching, the Baal Tanya uses the words, Mayach shalat al halev, the mind dominates the heart. And these words summarize the huge principle, the big idea that guides so much of our spiritual and emotional work. The idea is that our minds are the doorways to our hearts. Mayach shalat al halev, our mind dominates our hearts. The minds are the doorways to our hearts. Our minds are the control towers of our hearts. That means that by changing how we think about something, we could change how we feel about it. By changing our perspective, we change our experience of something. And as we open our minds to absorb the magnitude of Hashem's awesomeness, to think about Hashem, we naturally become open to feel love and awe of Hashem in our hearts. So that principle, that work, the work of changing our minds and really meditating about Hashem, learning about Hashem, thinking about Hashem, hearing the resistance in our minds and making decisions about it, all that, all that work is encapsulated in the words, Mayach shalat al halev, the mind dominates the heart. Now we already, and that the Baal Tanya tells us in chapter 17. Now we already learned these words in chapter 12. The words Mayach shalat al halev, we were introduced to them in chapter 12, and over there it means something different, a different nuance. And I think it's an important, the clarity of understanding the difference is just helpful in our work. Okay, so in chapter 12, these words were related in a different context. The first time the Baal Tanya introduces us to this principle, Mayach shalat al halev, it means something else. We're not talking about the mind dominating our hearts by meditating. That's not the work that we're talking about in chapter 12. That's in chapter 17. Chapter 17 is change your mind and change your find, right? change what you know in your mind, and then you'll change what you experience in your heart. That's Mayach Shal Tahalev of chapter 17. Parak Yud Beis, chapter 12, we learned something else. In chapter 12, we're learning the facts, the science of our operating system, of how we work. We're learning that our hearts are going to be pulled in many different directions. We're learning that we have no control of that heart, right? But our hearts have no control over our behavior. Our hearts have a huge voice in terms of pushing towards or pulling away from certain behaviors. But, and over there, right? But only our minds can give us permission to engage in any behavior. So over there in chapter 12, the concept of mind over heart is not talking about influencing our emotions. It's talking about influencing our behavior and choosing our behavior. And this is just a very huge, in chapter 12, it's a huge awareness that only our mind has the power to choose our behavior, not our heart. Even though it feels as if it's our heart, our behavior gets chosen only in our minds. Something that's unthinkable to us in our minds will be impossible, literally impossible for us to do in our behavior. So that's chapter 12. Even if our mind, even if our heart is pulling towards something, Mayach Shal Tahalev, the mind dominates the heart in terms of who gets to control our bodies. So in chapter 12, Mayach Shal Tahalev means our mind is in charge of our behavior, not our heart, even though it feels like it. And if we want to change our behavior, we need to make it unthinkable in our minds. Okay. In chapter 17, we're learning something else. We're learning that we can change our emotions directly. We can change our heart, not just our bodies, not just our behavior. We can actually change our heart, our emotions, by changing our mind. And because we could change our heart, we could influence our emotions. And now we can understand the words, that yes, we could choose. We could choose. We have a fail-proof way, a fail-proof path to fulfill the entire Torah with the words we say, with the emotions we feel in our hearts, and with our actions. And it's an absolutely possible way to be aligned with Hashem's reality all the time, with all of ourselves, in every moment, in every experience, in every situation. We have the power to influence our emotions by influencing our minds. By changing our minds, we could change what's in our hearts. Now, chapter 18 begins with a question, because it's very nice to know that we could change our emotions, but this takes tons of work. It's so hard to do. It's not just a simple thing. So how could the Torah call it very close? Karev elecha davar me'oid. It's not just a very a fail-proof path. It's a very accessible path. It's very simple almost. The word very seems to imply a quicker process. And the process that we've been talking about is a tremendous amount of work, a slow, step-by-step, inch-by-inch process. It's very easy to change our conscious thoughts, but our experience of life is guided and directed mostly by our deeper beliefs, not just by our conscious thoughts, by our deeper insecurities, by our deeper fears, right? So we're guided by our deeper beliefs and values, which we have collected mostly even before we were aware that we have beliefs and values. Every single one of us has so many insecurities, fears, lies that we believe, traumas that are deeply, deeply ingrained in our psyche, deeply embedded within our subconsciousness. And we can't access, yes, we could access these parts of ourselves through meditation and through the work of da'as, noticing them and deciding that Hashem's truth will fill those very spaces as well. But it takes a tremendous amount of work. I don't know about you, but for me, whenever I'm still working on letting go of shame and fears and lies and insecurities. And I've been doing this work for so many years. It's like an onion. There's always another layer to peel away. There's always another layer waiting to be discovered. And that's the beauty of Yiddishkeit, because Yiddishkeit is not about arriving anywhere. It's about the process. It's about doing the work. It's not about getting the work done. It's about doing it. Because every time we choose to let Hashem's voice, Hashem's presence, Hashem's love, Hashem's dignity, Hashem's value matter more than our lies, our insecurities, our fears, if I can let Hashem offer me comfort and even take a little bit of, give me a little bit of relief in my pain, then I have just transformed that inch in my heart, that inch in deep in my heart, from a place that does not know Hashem to a place that is deeply aware of and impacted, consciously impacted by Hashem. And that's what Geula is all about, bringing the aleph of Hashem's awareness into our hearts, our minds, and the world around us. And every time we do it, it's not just we're bringing Geula for ourselves, but we're bringing Geula for the whole world. So it's not about, of course, it's about getting there, but only Hashem is actually going to culminate this process, right? Our part, every time we discover a new lie, my father used to tell me, this is a whole new meaning of the word chutzpah. So every time I say a new meaning, I think about those words, right? It's a new, I bump into a lie and it's like a whole new meaning of the Yetzer Hara, a whole new meaning of shame, a whole new definition of trauma, of insecurity, of self-doubt, of self-hate, of self-sabotage, right? We bump into it all the time. And the work of letting Hashem's truth, letting Hashem's presence, letting Hashem's value matter in a real way, real enough that it makes a difference to our emotional, practical experience, that's the work. But it takes a tremendous amount of work. So how could we call it karev ma'od? We could say it's karev, it's close, it's fail-proof, it works, it's possible, but how could we say it's very close? And the Baal Tanya goes on to say that if the Torah is telling us this, that it's very close, it must be relevant for every single person. So what we're going to do now is let's read the first few lines inside of chapter 18, and then we will start exploring the answer, okay? So chapter 18, just going to do a couple of lines inside. Today will be mostly not text. So if you don't have a Tanya in front of you, that's fine. If you do have a Tanya, open up to chapter 18. Ulutaisves Be'er, for additional explanation, Be'er Heitev, we need a very good explanation. Milas ma'od shebepasuk. We need to explain the word ma'od, the word very. In the pasuk, Kikarev elecha hadavar ma'od. It's close to you, not it's just close to you. Karev elecha hadavar ma'od. It's very close to you. It's exceedingly possible. It's extremely accessible. What does that word very mean? Tzarich leida ne'amanu. We need to really understand it very, very well. Why? Because this obviously has to apply to everybody. Ki af misha daitai kitsara b'yediyas Hashem. Even somebody who has a limited intellectual capacity, who has a limited ability to do this work that we're talking about, meditating and integrating the ideas of Hashem's greatness and the knowledge and awareness of Hashem. It doesn't, it's possible for a person not to have that emotional capacity to be able to really absorb the greatness of Hashem. To give birth to emotions, actual fear and love of Hashem, or maybe even not, or maybe some people don't even have the ability to develop intellectual love or fear of Hashem. Afal PK, nevertheless, the Torah doesn't exclude them. The Torah is not saying, oh, it's close and very possible for everybody who has, good thinking power, or everybody who's more intellectually oriented, whoever is going to, really exercise the power of their mind to make these kinds of decisions. No, Karev elav hadavar ma'od means every single person, even people that do not learn a word of Torah to meditate on. Anybody, men, women, and children. The Baal Tanya goes on to say that even women who don't learn Torah at all could develop this love and could be absolutely aligned, even if they don't do any of this meditation work. Okay, so afal pikein karev elav hadavar ma'od lishmar v'lases kol mitzvos haTorah v'talmud Torah k'neged kulum. A person could every one of us could, it's exceedingly possible to guard and fulfill the entire Torah, the complete and entire Torah, every single one, to be fully aligned with Hashem. So how do we make sense of this? What the Baal Tanya goes on to say is that each and every one of us has an inherent love for Hashem, so that when we are meditating, we're not just generating and creating, giving birth to an emotion that's coming only from our minds. We are discovering and exposing emotions that already are deeply embedded within our hearts, because every single one of us has a natural predisposition. It's part of our spiritual DNA to be one with Hashem, to really know Hashem, to love Hashem, and to fear Hashem. And the Baal Tanya calls this the Ahava Mesuteres, the hidden love. Today we'll talk about it, and Amir Hashem, next week we'll go into it in the text, and then we'll continue on into chapter 19. So that's the general idea. The general idea is that each and every one of us has in our spiritual DNA, we have a hidden love for Hashem. Just like we have an instinctive fight or flight that gets triggered every time we are in physical danger, we have a spiritual instinct, love, a spiritual instinctive love for Hashem, that when it gets triggered, we automatically will do anything to protect our love, to protect our relationship with Hashem. Baal Tanya says, and that's why we see that people who have never educated themselves or have never been educated about Torah and mitzvahs, but when push comes to shove, and when they're threatened to give up their lives for Hashem, they automatically respond with an instinctive, what do you mean? I am a Jew. I would never be anything else. I would never deny my relationship with Hashem. My father shared with me a story that he once had. He was in a car service, and he was talking to the car service driver, and he realized the car, he had a Jewish name. So we asked him where, it was shortly after Tishrei, it was shortly after Yom Kippur. So we asked him, where did you daven on Yom Kippur? And he didn't say, oh, are you Jewish? He said, where did you daven on Yom Kippur? And the guy said, I didn't daven anywhere. I ate food on Yom Kippur. I learned in Hebrew school, the guy says, about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, but I don't go to a shul. I eat on Yom Kippur. I don't do anything. So my father wanted to test out this idea that the Baal Tanya says of, that any Jew would be willing to give up their lives to protect the relationship with Hashem at any cost, no matter what. So he said, really? What about, he started asking him different mitzvahs, and this guy kept saying, no, don't you get it? I never go to shul. I don't do anything, no mitzvahs. I, on purpose, do not do anything. And so my father said, what about if somebody would tell you, either you're going to have to go into the fire or renounce your Judaism, renounce your identity as a Jew. And the man pushed the car into park, turned around and said, are you kidding? I would be the first to jump into that fire before any rabbis or any other Jewish person. I would be the first. I am a Jew and I will always be a Jew. And this story, this experience touched my father very deeply. And when I was learning this chapter of Tanya with him, he told me this story. And he said, the inherent love for a Jew is so beyond logic and so beyond anything that we could comprehend. It's so deep, it's so big, that it's much deeper than could be expressed even in doing a mitzvah or eating on Yom Kippur or not eating on Yom Kippur or going to shul. Every single one of us has it. And we know many stories of people. Daniel Pearl was a journalist who was captured by Islamic terrorists who killed him. But right before his death, he said live on camera, my mother is a Jew, my father is a Jew, I am a Jew, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Here, yes, listen, Yisrael, Hashem is our power, and He is one. And it was broadcast live throughout the world. And he was not a person who grew up with Torah observance at all. And yet when his life was in danger and he was about to be killed, these are the words that came out of his mouth. It's unbelievable. It's incredible. And a lot of people, when they hear this, they ask, well, what about all those people who don't give up, who don't actually protect their relationship with Hashem? That's a different topic. And that is, we can talk about that. Today I want to explore something else, if it's okay with you. I want to talk about what this means in terms of our work, in terms of our spiritual work. Because the way we've been learning Tanya, we're kind of looking at it as a spiritual, emotional guide to what we could actually do. And as I was learning this Tanya, this parak, this chapter, I was thinking, well, it's very nice to know that I have this inherent love for Hashem. What am I supposed to do with this information? Right? Throughout the Tanya, we've been taking the facts, the ideas that the Baal Tanya has been telling us, and we've been thinking about it in terms of how are they guidance in our spiritual and emotional work? What are we supposed to do with this information? And I was thinking, what are we supposed to do with this? So it's very nice. And the next few chapters are all about this. They're all awarenesses. It's like the Baal Tanya is shining a light on something inside of ourselves. And yet it's beyond our reach. It's just there. And as I was thinking about it, here's what I came up with, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So please share them. Here's what I'm thinking. When we do meditation, when we use our minds and the power of our decision making to decide that Hashem is true, and we use our minds and focus our attention to try to really absorb the magnitude of that truth, and we listen to our subconscious, to the inner resistance, and we have a conversation with that inner resistance, and we tell the inner resistance, I know I've been thinking about you. I know that you've always been here and you thought this, but now as an adult, I am choosing to let Hashem's truth actually overwhelm you. And I can't hold on to you in the space. I can't hold on to my shame anymore in the face of my absolute, magnificent, exquisite, divine beauty. I just can't hold on to you, shame. I know you've always been here, but now you're not shameworthy anymore, because we're holding up Hashem's light to your face. And in that light, you're not shame. All the reasons that you had for believing in the shame melt away in the perspective as Hashem's truth becomes so big, the shame shrinks and melts away. And that's the work. Now, but then there's a part of ourselves that's way beneath our consciousness. It's in our genes, even. It's in our bodies. It's in our blood. And I don't even have awareness that these lies are there, because I took them on and I believed them before I had any consciousness. People talk about taking on beliefs, even in utero, how our minds begin to develop even before we're born. And this whole concept of genetics and epigenetics, and how we have so much going on inside of ourselves that's way beyond our awareness. And I think that when we consider all those ideas and all those parts of ourselves that are inaccessible from the conscious mind, we might hold our hands and say, well, the Tanya is all about using your mind to change your experiences in your heart. What about all those insecurities and fears and traumas that are beyond our minds? They're deeper, they're more deeply ingrained in our psyche than our minds could actually reach. So to this, the Baal Tanya is saying something, and we don't have to do anything about it. just knowing it, just having a light shine on this truth already gives us the reassurance that our work will be successful. And, and this is so important because nobody does something that we know we're going to fail. When we know we're going to win, when we know it's possible to succeed, we work harder. When we know that it's impossible to win, we just give up. So if I know that even though I'm going to do all this work, I'm never going to be able to change my deepest subconscious fears, insecurities, lies, traumas, I'm not going to really do that work. The Baal Tanya wants to tell us, don't worry. Yes, there are many, many deep stuff that you cannot access with your mind, certainly not easily. Okay, but let me tell you, let me tell you a little bit more about who you are. You see, you think that your fears and insecurities and traumas are the deepest part of you. Let me tell you something. There's something even deeper. There's something in you that precedes all of that. And with that, it's deeper than all of that. And let's touch on that. And when you touch on that, you shine a light on that, it opens it up. And you could relax, lean into that. And just knowing it's there gives us strength, courage, and hope, and conviction in doing our spiritual, emotional work. It's almost like, you know, the mind is coming like from the outside in terms of our consciousness, right? Because we're starting with our conscious thoughts, and we're trying to let it go deeper into our bodies, into our hearts, and into all the many, many layers of our consciousness. And along the way, there are blockages, there are stumbling blocks, and those are very difficult to get past, especially the ones that are invisible. So the Baal Tanya says, yeah, you're going to do that work. From chapter 12 to chapter 17 is all about that work of going from the mind, from the outside in. And now from chapter 18 and the next couple of chapters, the Baal Tanya says, let me tell you something also. There's something in that spreads out. So your work is come from the outside and let that sink in. But I want you to know, says the Baal Tanya, I want you to know that there's something deep inside of you that when you talk about it, when you have awareness of it, it activates. Just talking about it and having awareness of it already gives you access to it. It already opens it up and allows it to spread more into your consciousness. So the work is mind, from the outside in, almost from the outer layers of our minds, from our consciousness into our subconsciousness. But what the Baal Tanya is telling us is that deeply embedded within our subconsciousness, there is a treasure, there's a wellspring of absolute oneness with Hashem that loves Hashem actively, even as we're not aware of it. So just like we have fears, insecurities, traumas, doubts that we're not aware of, that we cannot access, that's been beyond our brains, beyond the reach of our minds, they're invisible to us. We have a treasure, a wellspring, an inner reservoir, an unstoppable flow of truth, of holiness, of oneness with Hashem, of beauty, of connection, of strength, of courage, of all the goodness that we want that's beneath our consciousness. And it's there for every single one of us. And the Baal Tanya asks in this chapter is like, okay, so now what is it? How do we get it? What does it do? What does it look like? And in the next few chapters, we answer those questions. We can do more text, but I wanted to take a pause now for questions. If anybody wanted to ask anything. So let me repeat the question. It seems that in chapter 12, the Baal Tanya is saying we don't have control over our hearts. And now in chapter 18, he's saying, or chapter 17, he's saying we do have control over our hearts. So it's not a contradiction because we don't have direct, in chapter 12, what he's saying is that in chapter 12, he's not really talking about our hearts. He's talking about our behavior. he's saying that no matter what your heart feels, over there means mind dominates the heart, means that when it comes to behavior, our mind is the part of us that chooses, not our hearts. And our mind always has that power of choice. And it talks about that our means that our minds could choose our behavior. Our minds could impact our behavior. He's not really talking over there about our hearts. In chapter 17 and other along the way, we've learned this. In chapter 17, it's kind of the wrap up where he's saying, not only could your mind choose your behavior, but through a lot of work of meditation and reflection and thinking about Hashem, your mind can also change your heart, change your experiences, the emotions that we feel in our hearts. In other words, in chapter 12, what the Baal Tanya is saying is, never mind your heart. First, the Baal Tanya says, never mind your heart. Bypass your heart. Whatever, if it's unthinkable to you in your mind, you won't be able to do it, even if your heart desires it. So the Baal Tanya is kind of saying, in the beginning, it's like your mind has the power of choice, not your heart, right? Only our mind gives our bodies permission to exercise any part of our bodies. Everything we say is subconsciously, right? We don't consciously make those choices, but everything comes from our minds. So that's chapter 12. But over the next few chapters, the Baal Tanya has taught us that through meditation, we could change how we feel, right? So that's the difference there. We could get our heart on board to do the right thing. We shouldn't wait till our heart is on board. We shouldn't wait till we feel like it. Like this, the line that I always say, es is krum hate, right? Do the right thing, even if we don't feel like it. We don't need to feel like it, and that's good enough. But we could also get ourselves to feel like it. And that's what we want to do. We want to, bring our hearts on board so that our hearts also feel like it. I'm going to answer, but you're going to have a much deeper understanding of the question when you learn the first couple of chapters, because that's where we really lay it out deeply in depth. Let's talk about it briefly because it's a good question. So the question is, when I'm looking, we're talking about the relationship between our mind and our heart. And we're saying that through thinking about Hashem's greatness, we could change what we feel in our hearts. And then we're saying that now we got our heart, it's a goal to get our heart on board and to actually feel like serving Hashem. So the question is, when I'm looking at my heart and I'm noticing all the different types of feelings, how do I know if they are aligned with Hashem or if they're not? For example, I might feel like, hey, I don't want to let people step all over me. But what it actually is that I am stepping all over other people. So how do I have that honesty to really know when I am aligned with Hashem and when I am not? And the answer is that, I think in short, is that we always have to, I think we have to evaluate, when it comes to behavior, we want to evaluate it not by the emotion behind it, but by the actual behavior. Because, they say the road to Gehenna is paved with good intentions, right? The road to nowhere good is paved with beautiful, meaningful, good intentions. So if we want to know whether, and our Yetzer Hara, our inner drive, a force of distraction and delusion, could really paint anything and make it look like truth when it's a lie. So to give ourselves clarity, we want to always get out of our heads altogether and just look at the bottom line. Is this behavior, is this behavior kind? Is this behavior, to use the example, it's never okay to be obnoxious to another person. It's never okay to be mean. It's never okay to do what you said, to step on them, to belittle, to be condescending, to push people away. It's never okay to relate with anger, with annoyance, with frustration, with, shaming other people. But at the same time, is it okay to set boundaries? Is it okay to be kind and say no? Absolutely. So we want to examine the behavior, and in the name of good intentions, we're never going to make a inappropriate behavior be okay. But if we go by just what we feel like, and we decide our reality based on our emotions and what's going on in our hearts, and even on what's going on in our minds, then we could easily get lost. We could easily get distracted, because our reality, it's in our minds. We could create a whole reality in our minds, and it doesn't actually have anything to do with the reality as it exists for other people, for outside of ourselves. So if we want to be honest, we need to just look objectively. This behavior, is it appropriate? Is it kind? Is it reflective of, is it godly? Is it holy? Is it aligned with that I am here in this world by Hashem, with Hashem, for Hashem? Or is it a reflection of by myself, with myself, and for myself? And I think that looking at the behavior without any strings attached gives us clarity. A lot of times people will say, you walk into a room and two kids are fighting, and one kid is beating up the other kid. You're like, whoa, stop. And the kid who's beating up says, not fair. You didn't see what the other person did to me, right? Well, the other person did to you is wrong, might be wrong. You're right, I didn't see, it might be wrong, but hitting is still wrong, right? If it's not in, as long as it's not in self-defense, the other person's actively hurting you, and now you're gonna, you're gonna push them away, that's self-defense. But beating up the other kid because they did it to you, or because they said they're gonna do it to you, that's not okay, right? And the other person's behavior does not justify our behavior. And I think we do this ourselves a lot of times, as we're telling the stories to ourselves in our own minds. Well, it's okay that I was obnoxious because that person was really getting under my skin. We justify all kinds of things in the name of, understanding the bigger picture. We want to really be honest, to really be aligned with Hashem's will. We want to look at our behaviors outside of our minds as they exist, just unattached to any stories, any explanations, any, reasoning, any rationalization. Just this behavior, is it aligned with Hashem or is it not? And I think that gives us a lot of clarity. Back to the Tanya. While Tanya said that says that the avos, and it's very interesting because when you know about epigenetics, right? When scientists today are talking about the epigenetics, how the behaviors and the traumas and the experiences of parents have a genetic influence on their children, right? Just their experiences, just their traumas are passed through the genes to children, right? So now from that perspective, that's like a little bit of how, the Torah's view on this is that each and every one of us has in our spiritual DNA, in our genetics, in our spiritual genes, as a result of our forefathers' experiences, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, because of them, we have in our DNA as a gift to them, or as a direct result of their work, we have an inherent love for Hashem, a commitment to Hashem. And this love is called Ava Mesuteres, a hidden love. And every single one of us has it. Where in our bodies is it? It's in the deepest parts of our minds. About Tanya says it's in the chachma, the chachma of our neshama. The chachma of our neshama that's beyond intellect, beyond reason. And the nuance is important. Here's why. We're talking about that every single one of us, ingrained in our neshama, at the core of who we are, there's not a light of Hashem. There is actual Hashem. Hashem's presence is found within us, within the chachma of our neshama. Now, the chachma of our neshama that we're talking about is not our intellectual process. It's a deeper level of chachma, a chachma that's beyond our consciousness. Chachma comes from two words, koyach, ma. Koyach is power, and ma means what? What means nothing. So it's a space in our consciousness that is bigger than words, that cannot be explained, that doesn't even come close to words. Rava had taught a halacha, and the other sages of his time questioned him and said, please explain. And he couldn't explain. It was something that he saw in his mind and he couldn't explain it. It didn't come in words. And nevertheless, the halacha was established, even though he couldn't explain it. It was established as part of the Gemara, as the halacha, as the operating guide that guides us to this day. And usually halacha is determined by logic and reason and a debate of back and forth. But here he had intense clarity about something, but it was deeper than what could be explained in words. So that was one level when I was listening to the share, Rabbi Yoel Khan was telling us that there's different levels of our chachma, of our ability to know. And that was one level. But in general, there is a difference between hearing and seeing. Most of our intellect could be compared to hearing. In hearing, listening is an active, right? We talk about active listening. To listen to somebody else, you need to do the work of tuning into what they're saying. When I'm trying to understand something, there's me, and I'm trying to understand something that is outside of me. But the key player in the story is me. I'm the one who's trying to understand. Okay? Seeing is something else. Seeing is that something is becoming known to me. I'm just standing here, but something is exposed, something is being shown, something is being revealed. So he compares the deeper level of chachma, the subconscious level of chachma, to seeing, not to hearing. All of our learning is an intellectual process of discovery that we do on our own. But our chachma is something that is seen. It's not something that I come to know. It's something that becomes known to me. And the reason why this is so important is because we know that Hashem's actual presence can only exist in the space of humility. Why? Because Hashem is the only truth. Hashem is the only existence. So when I say I exist, in that space where I'm saying I exist, even as an existence of a carrier of Hashem's light, for example, even if I say I exist as a student of Hashem, as powered by Hashem, whatever it is, the I is already a concealment of Hashem's truth. The separateness, I'm identifying as something separate from Hashem. My intellectual understanding, the fact that there's a me who is understanding, is already a covering for Hashem's presence, already a concealment of Hashem's absolute presence, because there's a me that's independent of Hashem. I experience myself as I am learning. I'm experiencing myself and my strengths. I'm experiencing my mind very, very strongly. I'm experiencing that independent of Hashem. So where does Hashem exist in our bodies? Beyond our ability to know. Because our ability to know is already independent of Hashem, is already something that we're conscious of. So it's specifically within our subconsciousness, beyond the greatness. It's like if you have, a parent, why do I love my daughter? You could say because she's so cute. You could say because she's mine. But when push comes to shove, no matter what, I love her and I'm connected to her and I'm one with her. I'm committed to her in a way that defies logic. Why do I love her? Because I love her. It's beyond reason. Why? Because we're one. And it's cannot be described in words. Our connection with Hashem, our oneness with Hashem, exists in a place in our bodies that's beyond our intellect. Because as long as it's our intellect itself exists as a power independent of Hashem, and with that, it conceals Hashem's presence. Does that, at the end of the chapter, we want to go all the way to the end, where it says, Ulagabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu L'mayla min haseichel v'hadas, v'leis machshava tvisa be klal, hakol kifsayim etzlei yisbarach. When we talk about in relation to Hashem, who is a way above and beyond any comprehension and any intellect, and no thoughts can grasp him at all, everyone is foolish in his presence. And when we say foolish, we don't mean it in a shaming way, but we know nothing. And when we feel in the space of that nothingness, that's where Hashem's presence actively resides in our bodies, in our subconsciousness. And David HaMelech says this in Tehillim when he says, "Vani ba'ar v'lo eda," I am foolish and I don't know anything. Behemais hayisi imach. It's as if I'm an animal before you. Va'ani tamid imach, and I am constantly with you. And at first glance, these words seem to imply that even though I am, quote unquote, nothing, right? Despite my nothingness, I'm still with you and you're still with me. But the Baal Tanya says that there's a deeper meaning here. He says that that's not what David HaMelech is saying. David HaMelech is saying the fact in this space where I know nothing because it's beyond me, in this space where my most primitive, deepest self, what is animal, because it's primitive, I can't refine it, I can't elevate that part of me because I cannot access it. It's deeply embedded in my subconsciousness. It's raw, primitive flesh as Hashem created it. In that space, ani tamid imach, because over there, because I can't access it, because it's beyond me, that's why Hashem's presence could be revealed there. Va'ani tamid imach. V'lachein, that's specifically where we are one with Hashem. And that's why even anyone, people who make light of mitzvahs, people who commit sins day and night, even every single one of us will have mesiras nefesh. That means we will put our own physical lives in danger. The word actually means we will give over our lives to protect our relationship with Hashem. Most of the time, al harayv, the Baal Tanya says, most of the time, b'soivlim inuyim kashim, people would tolerate immense pain just not to deny Hashem's oneness, not to deny Hashem's our faith in Hashem. And this doesn't come from a place of knowing Hashem. This doesn't come from a place of intellectual development. It could be at a place, it's specifically from the place of ignorance. Because in the place of logic, you could decide, is it worth me, giving up my life for Hashem? Maybe I should just not do this, and then I'll have the rest of my life to honor Hashem, right? In the place of logic and reason, there are many reasons why we shouldn't put our lives in danger to protect our relationship with Hashem. From the place of reason and logic, even if we know so much, we're not gonna, our reason and logic is not where we commit to Hashem. It's deeper than that. It's beyond that. So this place, this inner reservoir, this inner wellspring of faith and oneness and absolute connection with Hashem exists whether or not, without meditation, without contemplation, without any work, without any learning, even a complete ignoramus, somebody who never learned one word of the Aleph Beis has a inner reservoir of love and connection with Hashem. And that is as deep and not as deep, it's deeper. It's in that same territory. It's in the same neighborhood as our insecurities, our fears, our traumas that are inaccessible to us. In that space that's inaccessible to us, there is an actual part of Hashem. That's where the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of Hashem, resides within us. And it's beyond our reason, beyond our logic. Meir Mechaya Kol HaNefesh. I'm sorry, I missed something. I want to go back to it. When we were talking about Chachma being Ma, meaning nothingness, because Ma means what? When someone says, when what is an answer, what is a question, means that you're going to give me an answer. But what as an answer means there is no answer. What? It's nothing. It's not an answer. It's nothing. It's not descriptive. It's not definitive. It's Ma. It is what it is, as they say, right? It is what it is. It's beyond, we use the word it is what it is in a different context. But Ma is what? It's nothing. But the Baal Tanya says that it's even though you say it's nothing, it has a kayach. We're not just calling it Ma, we're saying kayach Ma, the power of nothingness. Because from this space within our deep subconsciousness, this is not, it's latent, it's inherent, but it's not passive. It's a kayach, it's a force, it's an energy, it's powerful, and it has the power to rush through all the layers of our consciousness and be expressed on the outermost layer of who we are in our words and in our actions. And that's the power that every single one of us has, even without meditation. So the question is, how do we access that? That's something that I want to think about more, and I'm encouraging everybody to think about more. How do we access that? Because the Baal Tanya is not telling us how to access it. He's just telling us that it's there. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe just knowing that it's there gives us access to it. It's kind of like turning on the light of awareness on what's going on inside of ourselves. Just like we go to therapy to discover our inner wounds and our inner insecurities and our fears so that we can work with it, right? So here the Baal Tanya is giving us spiritual therapy, turning on a light of what's going on in our deepest subconsciousness, that each and every one of us has the Ar Ein Sof, the light of Hashem, the infinite light of Hashem, embedded, deeply ingrained within us. And it's not passive, it's active, it's a koyach, it's a force that has the power to show up in our thoughts, in our speech, and in our action, even if we do nothing, even without any preparation. So I want to just share one other thought on this, and then we'll conclude. And it's going to come up in the later chapters of Tanya, but because I'm asking the question, I want to share where my thoughts are currently. How do we trigger our fight or flight instinct? How does our fight or flight instinct get triggered? How? It gets triggered when we understand that there's a danger. It gets triggered when our minds decide that something dangerous is happening and we are not safe. So automatically we're flooded with adrenaline and with all that the process of making ourselves safe. We automatically rush into our amygdala, right? We automatically get into that primitive state of our being so that we can protect ourselves. That's how our fight or flight instinct works. We don't have to do anything, right? But the science of it is that the minute we know we're in danger, it activates. So our spiritual instinct of love for Hashem and connection and absolute oneness, it's there. And I want to ask, and I've been asking myself all week, how do I trigger it? How do I activate it? How do I bring it to the forefront? How do I benefit from it? So I really do think that just knowing that it's there is encouraging. It gives me strength. It tells me that I'm going to win, that I could win. No, even if I fail in this moment, this is my truest self. This is who I am. This is where I belong. And there's something else that I've been thinking about, and that is that we could activate it by recognizing that every, let's to backtracking for a second, a 2-year-old running into the street doesn't feel afraid, and therefore doesn't have his fight or flight mode activated. He's just going because he doesn't have a sense of danger. Why doesn't he have a sense of danger? Because intellectually he doesn't understand that the streets are dangerous. So his lack of understanding is preventing his fight or flight mode from being triggered, from being switched on. So I think our lack of understanding of our relationship with Hashem and the oneness of Hashem prevents our oneness with Hashem, prevents our instinctive love for Hashem from being turned on. Do you hear what I'm saying? In other words, I think that I'm perfectly safe running into the street. Therefore, I'll run into the street. I'm perfectly safe. I can drink this poison and it won't impact me. I make that decision, right? And then when I'm given that poison to drink, my fight or flight mode doesn't get triggered. My fight or flight instinct doesn't get triggered because I don't think it's dangerous. And spiritually, I could engage in all kinds of self-destructive behaviors because that's not touching my relationship with Hashem. It's like that story of the cab driver. When my father told the cab driver, hey, if someone tells you, renounce your Judaism or jump into the fire, the guy said, what? Are you kidding me? He put the car into park. My father said he was like scared. He started, well, I'll be the first one to jump into the fire. Why? Why would he be the first one to jump into the fire when he has no problem eating on Yom Kippur? And I think it's because for him, eating on Yom Kippur is fine. I'm not renouncing my Judaism. I'm not getting into dangerous waters. I'm just being me. It's okay. It doesn't matter what I do. My relationship with Hashem is not being touched. It's fine. It doesn't matter. But the second you ask him about something that he decides does matter, whoa, there's a fire burning. The fire of his inherent love for Hashem. Even though he never learns Torah, never does any mitzvahs, doesn't really think about Hashem. But there's a fire burning deep inside his soul. And it's going to be activated the second he has awareness that that our relationship is on the table. It does matter what I do because our relationship is on the table. So to activate our inherent love for Hashem, what I'm trying to say is what I think could be is that to realize the magnitude of everything we do. Everything we do is part of our relationship with Hashem. In every action, I am either expressing Hashem's oneness or I'm rejecting it. Either Hashem is true or I'm not true. Now, some of you listening might say, Shterna, don't be so extreme, okay? What do you mean either Hashem is true or he's not true? But, don't be so extreme. But I think the clarity of knowing that we're either up or down, we are either black or white, not that the whole world is black and white. Of course, there are so many areas of gray, but our behavior is always going to be either aligned with Hashem or not aligned with Hashem. And in that sense, there's no black and white. And when we have that clarity that in every word that I say, every action that I take, every step that I take, every action that I engage in, every conscious thought that I'm having is either an expression of my neshama or of my yetzer hara, or it's not, right? It's either going towards Hashem or away from Hashem. It's either galus or geula. I'm either in this moment being part of the solution or I'm being part of the problem. It's that clear. Either it's aligned with Hashem or it's not aligned with Hashem. And if it's aligned with Hashem, then it's holy and it's an expression of my deepest self. And if it's not aligned with myself, with Hashem, then I won't do it. That guy, the cab driver, he had clarity that when he's posed with the question, jump into the fire or renounce your Judaism, he had no doubt that he would jump into the fire. But when he was looking at his choice to eat on Yom Kippur or not eat on Yom Kippur, to go to shul and daven or not to daven, right? To keep Shabbos for an hour, for a half an hour or not to keep Shabbos for a half hour. He had none of that clarity. Over there, it was more, do I want yellow or do I want blue? But when he was looking at the fire, it was like, do I want to be or do I want to not be? Am I going to be me or am I not going to be me? And that clarity triggered his fire to burn brightly. And we could invite the strength of that fiery passion and that energy of commitment and unstoppable empowerment to choose when we give ourselves that clarity, when we look at our lives, that every single choice we make is either godly or not godly. It's either an expression of Hashem's oneness, of our faith and commitment to Hashem's oneness, or it's not. And having that awareness gives us the clarity, because none of us want to renounce our oneness with Hashem. None of us want to do that. We all want to be one with Hashem. So with asking ourselves this question, is this godly or is it not godly? It triggers that inherent love for Hashem, and it gives us energy and commitment and conviction to do what we really know is right for us, to protect our relationship with Hashem and to protect our relationship with our deepest selves. Okay, this was a little bit deep. And next week we continue exploring this hidden love. We're actually going to be doing this for the next couple of weeks, and it's beautiful because in each chapter there's more of awareness of what does it look like. Like in the next chapter, chapter 19, it's all about like how the neshama is like a flame and what that looks like. And I think that just having this awareness already puts us in touch with it and gives us access to it. So I'm very excited to be doing these chapters. That's a beautiful question. Someone's sharing a very good question to ask ourselves in every choice that we make. Is this helpful or is it hurtful? The whole through chapter 17, it was about thinking about the greatness of Hashem. Now the Baal Tanya is taking us inward to get to know ourselves. What you're saying is that meditation really, really works. That's really what we've been talking about we've been talking about that for a long time. What the Baal Tanya is telling us beyond meditation, that there are parts of ourselves that cannot easily be accessed through meditation alone. And for this, we need something else beyond meditation. Of course, we need meditation. The Alter Rebbe, in telling us this, is not telling us, okay, so don't meditate because it's not going to be worth it. What he's saying is, when you meditate, you will be successful because you're not creating something new. You're not generating a new emotion. You have something already inside of you. You have a place inside of you where you already love Hashem, where you're so you're so one with Hashem that you don't even feel yourself separate, and you will never want to be separate. And when this is touched and threatened, you would rather surrender your life because you have no life outside of Hashem. So the question that I think a lot of people have is, okay, so now, because we're used to like, okay, so what am I doing with that? How is this going to be a strategy? How is this going to be a tool? So awareness itself is a tool, but I'm going to think about more. How does this become a tool? What is awareness of the fact that I have innate love for Hashem? What does it actually do for me? What does it actually do for you? I'm curious if any of you can think about it over this week and be in touch and share with us next week. And maybe that's the tool. Maybe that's the tool of this chapter 18, that asking ourselves this question, am I with Hashem or not? And is this behavior aligned with Hashem or is it not? Maybe that activates it. I mean, it does activate it, but maybe that's the practical implication. Our Ahava Mesuteres is not an inherent love like a flowing water. It's a burning fire that could burst forth into full-fledged expression in our consciousness and even in our behavior. So the question that we're asking is, how do we do that? How do we set it on fire? I love the way you're saying that. Like, we should develop emotional, spiritual maturity, knowing more about Hashem, knowing more about our neshama, just like the child needs to learn that, that walking into the gutter, into the street is not a good idea. So we need to develop more spiritual maturity and emotional, awareness of who Hashem is, what we are, and what does it mean to walk into walk into traffic on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, on an emotional level. Spiritually, we walk into traffic all the time. We do things that hurt ourselves spiritually, but we're not aware. So the way you're saying it now, it's like making me aware that we talked about this, but what you're saying is that spiritual maturity is what it's about, is what activates it. And I think you're onto something.
Excitement.
Yeah, and from that perspective, this chapter comes to tell us that even if we're feeling distressed or despair because I can't do that meditation, I'm just not, it's not my style, it's not my type of brain, it's not my type of personality. So here the Baal Tanya is saying, well, you could still be a Beinoni, because even if you don't change anything about yourself, even if you don't do any of that intellectual work that we talked about up to this point, you could still be a Beinoni because you have it in you. And I'm looking forward to next week, Emir Tashem, exploring chapter 19. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Take care. Thank you, Gila.